Hello there, everybody, and well, allow me to introduce you to something that literally came up a few days ago, but the sort of thing that I feel like I kind of wanted to tell you guys about, because for some reason, well, GB News decided to go with a story about apparently William Shakespeare, famous English playwright, poet, is being, well, cancelled apparently for what this post in the New York Post calls decolonizing Shakespeare. Experts blame white supremacy for playwright's fame as hometown museum vows change. Now, I'm going to suggest to say one thing just before we actually get started with this. I don't believe that. Why? Because first of all, this is under weird but true. Well, true to who? Like, and is this thing actually based on fact, or is this just this should be weird opinions, but they're true because we say they are, so you're going to believe it. And I'm gonna be honest with you guys. Let's go through this. To be or most definitely not to be. Regarded as the most influential writer in the English language, some of William Shakespeare's work is now viewed by critics as racist, sexist, and homophobic. As a result, Shakespeare's birthplace, well, they don't even say where. Do they want to specify where his home place was? You tell me. Trust is decolonizing his hometown museum over the growing concerns about how his ideas are being portrayed today. Right, and what ideas are these, by the way? The Trust, which owns several buildings in Shakespeare's hometown of Stratford-upon-Avon, well, okay, there we are. It finally took us. They finally decided to say where it is, and a collection of personal documents of the writers, wants to create a more inclusive museum experience by promising to remove offensive language from its collections. As part of our ongoing work, we've undertaken a project which explores our collections to ensure they are as accessible as possible, a statement from the Trust read. According to GB News, well, the Trust intends to research how Shakespeare's artifacts could be interpreted to be less offensive and more diverse and inclusive. This discussion surrounding Shakespeare's work has been going on for a few years. Has it, though? Really? And if so, well, why? What exactly is the issue here? What is it about what Shakespeare was writing about? What's the relation? What's the evidence suggesting things need to change? Because surely you would understand as well as I would if they're going to say that it needs to be more inclusive, and they accuse Shakespeare of being this, that, and the other. Surely they must be able to back it up with actual evidence of the things that Shakespeare wrote. Also, there would be a discussion to be had about the context. Not only about when this was written, but also about what exactly is the context within the scene. You see, theoretically, ladies and gentlemen, when a character says quite strong language, or they do think that it's done out of in the context of a play, it should be done with fire and fury. It's meant to obviously communicate to the audience that one character is extremely angered by another character, and said character wants to do everything in their power to belittle and make the other person feel as small as possible. This is a thing that's been, well, I think it's hard to say whether or not it started technically with Shakespeare, or whether or not it started with Marlowe, or whether it goes even further back in time than Shakespeare. But basically, think about everything we've actually managed to build off of the back of Shakespeare's formula and his structure for narrative. And, well, 3 years ago, a research project conducted by the Trust and Dr. Helen Hopkins of the University of Birmingham suggested that the writer's works benefits the ideology of white European supremacy, as reported by The Telegraph. How? How does Shakespeare's works benefits the ideology of white European supremacy? How does it do that? Adaptations of Shakespeare's work has been going on for hundreds of years, but in 2023, the historic Globe replica in London, which is closely associated with the writer, issued a warning of misogyny and racism for their performance of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Well, they say that, but did they at any point, mention whatsoever what happened during the performance in A Midsummer Night's Dream that led to that? By the way, have those people? This strikes me as the sort of people who've never actually studied or read A Midsummer Night's Dream. According to the Daily Mail, at the time, a spokesman for the Globe said, "Content guidance is written in advance of the creation of each production and based on what is present in the play. These will be updated as the production comes to life." A year prior to that, many US schools wanted to take Shakespeare out of the curriculum, stating that the writer's work promoted racism. Well, are they going to actually back any of this up with any evidence? Whoever wrote this article really must you wouldn't even pass GCSE English language with this level of reporting, because this is the most basic level of mistakes a journalist can make by not actually supporting your these quotes with any sort of evidence whatsoever. While many around the world are doing what they can to no longer promote the writer's work, I don't know why you would do that. There's reasons why Shakespeare is still studied, you know what I mean? Broadway doesn't seem to be joining the bandwagon. And you know what? Right there, bandwagon. That completely sums up the nonsense of this entire article. And guess what, guys? Here's what I'm actually going to tell you right now. I don't believe they're actually gonna do anything about it. You know why I don't think they're gonna do anything about it? For the same reason why I think this is a completely non-story. Because they don't support. Because one, the article doesn't actually support it with any quotes or any evidence. They just say it does, so therefore it has to be changed. Also, are you sure about that? Where does it? Because again, where does it? I studied a couple of Shakespeare's plays. I studied Othello. I studied Hamlet. I studied As You Like It. I studied the Macbeth. And well, outside of the fact that the only thing that Macbeth told me is that the Scottish were absolute psychos, and guess what? They still are. But you don't ever see the whole of Scotland jumping up and down saying, cancel Macbeth, because they make us all look like crazy backstabbing lunatics. You know what? It's for this. Again, how does this thing promote racism then? To be honest, I don't really think Shakespeare was the sort of person who would now listen, here's the thing. We go back to 16th or 17th century, and guess what, guys? It's hard to. I have no idea whether or not you could actually say Shakespeare was racist or not, but if you're really trying to tell me that is because do we actually know that? Well, no, we don't. Also, has that actually ever stopped anybody from saying we shouldn't be studying Shakespeare anyway? Also, they make references to things, but they don't actually back up any of these claims whatsoever. This is not journal, guys. This is not journalism. It's the same way that GB News is not journalism either. They're trying to push a narrative, and it's got it without any reference to fact whatsoever. I mean, I even saw when they tried to do the story presented by Nana Akua from GB News, and again, I don't. What exactly are they trying to convey here? They don't. They try to say, oh, it's because woke nonsense and all that. They say that the lefties are they're the ones who are trying to snap everything in half, and they're trying to break culture. Well, guess what, guys? I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a reality check, guys, when it comes to that. that's not true either. I think actually, you know what? I think there's much better things to do, because I think, again, people who are actually hardwired, people who actually have a little dose of reality, they do realize that, well, if they always knew, if they had this impression of them, then, what difference has that made yet? And also, have you actually ever read any work by Shakespeare? And has Shakespeare at any point ever said, go out there and literally raise hell and don't give a two monkeys about who you hurt in the process? Well, of course he isn't. This is a complete non-story, and it's all down to the fact that it's trying to drive a larger wedge between people. That's why they're running this story, because I don't believe for 1 second Shakespeare is going to be cancelled anytime soon. The poor bloke's been dead for nearly 500 years, and you're really trying to tell me that the only thing to do is to completely disgrace his legacy one page at a time. Believe you me, guys, there are much bigger fish to fry, and there are much bigger fish out there who have done far worse things, who are still ongoing, you know, like Orson Scott Card or Frank Miller. Bear in mind, guys, Frank Miller DC Comics always bangs on about how Frank Miller was the greatest writer of Batman for writing, you know, The Dark Knight Returns, and yet people always seem to forget that that's the same Frank Miller who wrote Holy Terror and All-Star Batman and Robin. All-Star Batman and Robin, ironically, is also the worst Batman story ever written. And Frank Miller is someone who absolutely was a racist, and it's reflective absolutely in his work. And anyone who wants to see that at its very worst, you should probably go read or don't read the book Holy Terror, because it was originally meant to be a Batman story in which a guy and a woman they beat up a bunch of terrorists by torturing them, and then apparently finding out where their lair is, and they've completely stopped the Taliban or something like that. It's insane, it's ridiculous, and it's completely without tact and completely without any semblance of taste. Quite the opposite from Shakespeare. But then again, I think this all comes down to people who've actually never read Shakespeare, never studied Shakespeare, didn't know exactly what the culture surrounding Shakespeare was, and I think it's just done because they want to try and put one person against the other. I think honestly that's the whole point they did this story. It's not about anything actually based on fact, despite the New York Post saying weird but true. It's not weird, it's not true, it's desperate and patronizing that you think that people are just going to roll over and believe that. And yet people actually do believe that. That's the sad thing about all of this, is that there are people out there who not only believe it, but who also preach it as saying that our culture is completely on the decline. Because apparently it was too much for people to take, despite the fact that people are spreading lies about what people really say. Because why don't they come forward then? Why is there no quotes attributing to how... Again, why is there no evidence of what people are saying about why Shakespeare is promoting white European supremacy? Well, where is it then? Where is the evidence? Golden girls and lads all must, as chimney sweepers all come to dust. Bit of Shakespeare for you right there. Yeah, who says I'm not cultured? There you go.